earnings have really been a propellant here, and nowhere have earnings shown a more dramatic recovery than in the travel and leisure sector. The latest sign, hotel giant Hilton reporting fourth quarter revenue nearly double to $1.83 billion, with occupancy rates in the U.S. and Canada nearly tripling to 63%. Marriott, which reported a beat yesterday, says its occupancy rate jumped to 60%. Marriott's up, Hilton down fractionally, but the star of the lodging sector, Airbnb. Not only did the home rental leader beat on both the top and bottom line for Q4, but Airbnb says 2021 was the best year in company history thanks to record revenue, which spiked 77% to $6 billion. Airbnb also guided higher for the current quarter, propelled in part by a recovery in European travel. But the State Department at this hour has imposed a level 4 Ukraine travel advisory, specifically warning, quote, "Do not travel to Ukraine due to the increased threats of Russian military action." Joining us live to discuss that, Airbnb's latest earnings and more, is Airbnb CEO Brian Chesky. Welcome back, Brian. Great to have you here. Let me just take this Apple Watch and throw it across the room. I tried to get Siri to turn off the alerts, and it wouldn't work. Sorry about that. Brian, you guys knocked the earnings out of the ballpark. We'll get to that in a moment, but you have more. As we were looking on the site this morning, my team and I, you have more than 300 home listings in Kiev alone. What is the latest on your Ukraine hosts? How are you communicating with them and your customers in the region?
Well, yeah, Liz, first of all, thank you for having me back on the show. Safety and security of our guests and hosts is our top priority. And so right now, obviously, we have hosts in Ukraine. We have guests that stay in the Ukraine. And so what we're focused on right now is just making sure our community members are safe. And if they need us, they can reach us 24/7. We have 24/7 support and safety and security lines. So that's really what we're focused on right now.
Well, yeah, and I would think because you've got some commercial flights that now don't have insurance if they venture into Ukrainian and Crimean airspace. You are looking at international travel as part of this comeback story. How concerned are you, or have you guys had meetings or talked about whether a chill may spread across more of Eastern Europe beyond just Ukraine and parts of Russia?
I mean, I think one of the lessons, Liz, from the last 2 years it's very difficult to predict events around the world, and anyone that was in the business of predicting the future has been humbled. So I try to, instead of trying to predict exactly how things are going to play out, build a culture in a company that is resilient and able to adapt to however the travel changes. We have nearly every type of home and nearly every type of community at nearly every price point all over the world. So however travel changes, I've asked our team to make sure they're ready to adapt. Our community is inherently resilient. We're continuing to invent and innovate, but also we want to make sure we're always there for our guests and hosts whenever they need us, because we know this is a very uncertain time and they need to be able to reach Airbnb. Yeah. So that's really what we've been focused on.
The fourth quarter earnings, they knocked the lights out. Second profitable quarter in a row, but Wall Street is really embracing your better than expected first quarter revenue forecast. Can you, Brian, go out on a limb and say that 2022 will be the first full year of net profits for you guys?
I mean, I hate to
not to ask you to predict, but
yeah. But what I would say, exactly. So, but I would just to look backwards. I think one of the things that people can take confidence in is look at the quarter by quarter improvement, starting with the pandemic. But then when we got to a slightly more normalized place, I think what you're going to see is quarter by quarter, you're seeing a couple trends. Number one, there's a whole new way people are traveling. They're staying longer. Half our nights booked now are for a week or longer. This is a wide open new category of travel for Airbnb. We're having people travel to thousands of communities all over the world. We're in 100,000 communities. So this new way of traveling is here to stay. At the same time, what's really exciting is cross-border travel and urban travel, which was the vast majority of our business before the pandemic. That is going to come back. We saw cross-border travel was only 20% of our nights booked during the depths of the pandemic. It's now about 35% of our nights booked. And I think that's going to continue to grow. And the other trend, Liz, I'm seeing is more and more people are less tethered to an office, right? Not everyone, but a lot of people aren't going to have to go back to work 5 days a week. And if you don't have to go back to the office 5 days a week, you have more flexibility. I think as people have more flexibility, they're living in different places, they're staying longer, but they're also, when borders reopen, they're going to start traveling and living more abroad. So we're going to see a lot of longer stays in different countries as people get used to traveling. And I think this is going to open up a whole new category of travel. So we're really excited, and I think this is going to be a new golden age for travel.
Well, specifically, your stays, the longer stays, 28 nights or more accounted for 22% of gross nights booked in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Brian, how does that compare, not to last year, because that's crazy, but pre-pandemic bookings?
I mean, the really interesting thing is this was always the fastest growing segment of travel. And before the pandemic, it was still well above 10% of our nights booked. And it's been steadily increasing year by year. I think what the pandemic did, less than creating new behavior, is I think it accelerated many trends that were inevitable. I think the pandemic probably brought forward by many years the acceleration of digitization. As the world gets more digital, everything becomes more ubiquitous. You don't have to be in any one location as much as you used to. The place to be for most people now is the internet if you have an office or knowledge working job. And so I think what it did is just accelerated trends that we are already seeing. And this is a really big deal, that 22% of our nights were for stays of a month or longer, and nearly half our business was for stays of a week or longer. What I know is the longer you're away from home, the more you want to be in a home. And it becomes very cost prohibitive for many people to stay in a hotel that long. So this whole new category, I think, is really, really interesting for Airbnb.
Speaking of trends and new categories, I wasn't even going to ask you this. It involves the M word, metaverse, but, because I thought that's ridiculous. I can't envision it. Then I started to think about how Airbnb could actually dip its toe into the metaverse. And then my team saw that JP Morgan has opened a virtual bank in the metaverse, complete with, I don't know, a roaming tiger and a framed photo of Jamie Dimon. I think we've got a picture of this. There's a still photo. The picture does not look like Jamie Dimon. But then I thought, for people who can't afford a trip, say, to a castle in Ireland, how about a virtual trip? How do you envision Airbnb participating in the metaverse?
Well, I mean, I think this is very, very early days for ideas like this. I think that the internet, which is pretty much still a two-dimensional thing, will become more three-dimensional and more immersive. So I think that is inevitable. I also think things like the metaverse and the three-dimensional internet are not going to replace the real world. I think they're going to become gateways to the physical world. I think the internet didn't replace people traveling. In fact, I think it inspired more travel. So we don't have any near-term plans. I mean, right now, Liz, what we're most focused on is many people have been stuck in their homes for 2 years. They haven't been able to travel. And the thing they miss is not more screen time. What they miss is getting out in the physical world, seeing family, seeing friends, seeing travel. And so, that's really where our focus is going to be this year. This is going to be a travel rebound, I think, unlike any other. I thought last year was going to be that. I think this year's probably going to be even bigger. And so we want to be there when people want to gather in the real world, because this is also a very lonely time for a lot of people. And I think what they really need is the connections that are most nourishing that come from being in the physical world. So that's what we're going to be focused on right now.
Before we go, I know you're coming to us live from another Airbnb. You've been hopscotching the nation all over the place. What's the one thing you've learned that makes the best Airbnb experience? I've done Airbnbs. I like when they leave a laminated instruction sheet on how to operate everything.
Well, I mean, it's funny you ask. You're right. I think when people see Airbnb, they see homes, but behind every home is a host. And a great Airbnb is going to have a great host who learns about you and accommodates the experience. So, for example, I'm not traveling alone. I'm traveling with a 7-month-old golden retriever puppy named Sophie. And so, I have a pet with me. The host asks, "What are you traveling with?" I said, "I have a little dog." And the best hosts, they'll have little dog treats and little biscuits for Sophie. So, I mean, I think just like anything that provides a personalized experience is great. And I can assure you that Sophie would prefer Airbnbs now than hotels.
I bet. I would expect you to say nothing else, considering you guys have completely disrupted the hotel industry. Brian, thank you very much for joining us on a killer quarter there, and we'll be watching when you report your first quarter. Thanks. Come back.
Well, thank you very much, Liz.